Hello and welcome to the Chocolate Podcast, the home of chocolate here on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm your host, Ed Easton. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Andrew Nason.
Hi, Ed. How are you doing?
I'm incredibly excited, Andrew, because we are starting a new journey, having spent the last months exploring the health benefits, the secrets of cacao as an ingredient, and both, I think, coming to the conclusion that it is the superfood of all superfood. We are now undertaking a mission to trace the impact of this extraordinary foodstuff on human civilization from the very, very first cacao cultivators all the way up until the present day. And I can't wait. I'm really, really, really excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a real adventure, I think, this time. And I think, it's good to ask, when we're exploring these early civilizations why should we care? Why should people listen to this podcast about the world's first chocolatiers? What do you think, Ed? What's the heart of why this is going to be an unbelievable story?
I think looking at firsts is always incredibly interesting. The first people to do something, why they did that, why they broke the mold. And I think we're looking at something like chocolate. And when you look at how difficult it is to take the humble cacao pod and produce something which resembles even chocolate, it involves a remarkable process of trying this sort of bizarre, crazy looking fruit, and then, I don't know, not only trying it, but then fermenting it, drying it out, grinding this down, mixing it with water. It's a remarkably complicated process. And so I think the question of looking at those first people who did that, they are going to be, by definition, some of the most extraordinary people to have lived, because they're trendsetters. They're people that are looking at new ways of doing things. And I think in today's world, more than ever, I think it can be almost inspiring to look back and see what and why those people were doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we should give credit to somebody that creates the world's first cappuccino, right? And a chocolate cappuccino at that. We've got to learn about them and explore how they did it and why they did it. And then that, when you're drinking your own cappuccino, is going to enhance the whole experience. So I think that's one of the reasons why. But I think also, Ed, you drive in a car, right?
More as a passenger, but yeah, I've been in cars.
Well, without the Olmecs, that wouldn't be happening. And I've seen you on your phone and on your computer.
Yeah.
Without the Olmecs, wouldn't be happening.
As far as I know, weren't the inventor of the car nor the computer. Why do you say that the Olmecs, for our listeners, these are the first sort of really big civilization that we see in Central America, and they were some of the earliest adopters of cacao as not just a drink, but as a sort of a cultural practice as well. Why do you say the Olmecs helped me build my car and my laptop?
We know that the Olmecs weren't called the Olmecs.
That's true.
We know that they were called by the Aztecs the rubber people.
Yeah, it's a Nahuatl word, which means because they were big fans of rubber. Yeah.
So guess what? They vulcanized rubber. Thousands of BC, and it took us until Michelin, or Goodyear in 1840, and without vulcanized rubber, your bicycle wouldn't work, nor would your car.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. They're pretty amazing people, the Olmecs. We're talking 1,800 BC when they sort of first pop up. And they really do, my understanding is they really do pop up out of nowhere. Like suddenly we just get these quite big cities appearing as if by magic in the middle of Central America.
Yeah, I think pop up is the right word, because it's popcorn. It's literally popcorn that probably created this incredible civilization.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know they were necessarily popping it. They probably were, but
they were popping it. How else do you eat it? You couldn't eat it when the wild popcorn seed was basically inedible. And
they must have had.
I think it fell into a fire and popped, and then they ate it, and then they built one of the world's great civilizations from that simple process. So they're the popcorn people.
pretty much the history of Central America is indebted to maize. You are right. I mean, you look at the first, even kind of pre-Olmecs, the first sort of people doing anything were sort of able to do so because they'd learned how to sort of cultivate maize. Interesting, the Olmecs also, I mean, big fishers as well. They loved their fish, particularly in San Lorenzo, which is sort of the Olmec capital, was sort of an early fishing town and then sort of a city. And so, yeah, I mean, these guys were, I mean, 1,800, I mean, that is 3,000 plus years ago.
We haven't answered the computer question. How can you operate your iPhone without the Olmec?
I mean, again, I this is not something that I've come across.
That didn't come up in your research.
No, it didn't. I didn't realise.
Well,
Steve Jobs and I don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Olmec were the creators of my iPhone.
So I understand, and we can discover if this is correct. But they were the inventors of zero, and without zero, you don't get binary, and without binary, you don't get computers.
They definitely did have zero, like 100, and they're one of the first people to do so. Yeah.
Well,
100.
without zero, you're not going to get a binary system, and you're not going to get Apple.
What would it?
So these guys are pretty goddamn amazing. They invented the tire.
What was life like before zero? Like, surely, what were they sort of doing? Oh, I haven't got any corn. Like, what were they? Sure, they had some idea of. I don't know, like they're not being a quantity that was nothing.
Well, I don't think you can do kind of infinity or complicated sums without zero.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying, like the idea that, like, I don't know, anyone invented zero. Like, I'm trying to imagine what before that person came along and said, all right.
Well, you're taking it away from the Olmecs.
Well,
like, you're taking, like, their popcorn, their zero, their chocolate culture,
it's not,
not giving them any credit.
I mean, the Olmecs were clearly, and like, we'll talk about this more, but they were keen mathematicians. They loved their calendars. And absolutely right, it seems that they had this idea that there could be, like, zero as like a quantity that was sort of nothing. But I guess my point is, like, what before they made that discovery, right? How are they describing not having something? Like surely there was a word like not, for example, that I just can't imagine not knowing about zero. I guess, like, it's such an important part of the way that I sort of, I don't know. It's as important as 1, 2, and 3. It always amazes me that wasn't something we always knew about.
Yeah, I think it's use in mathematics as opposed to, like, somebody to be or not to be, having popcorn or not having popcorn. It's the mathematical use.
I have zero popcorn.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's probably how they found it. I mean, to be honest. I mean,
but Ed, this is why we should care about the Olmecs. We've got rubber, okay? And the modern world doesn't work without rubber. We've got zero and computers, but there's also something very close to your heart that they also invented. And what might that be? That is resonating today around the world globally in the most incredible fashion.
I mean, they loved a big head. And there's a few big heads around today.
They've got colossal heads.
They've got the colossal heads, which, I mean,
how about football?
I don't know.
They're the first civilization, I believe, and we can get this corrected, that had football using a round rubber ball and sort of hitting it with protective gear and turning that into a spectacle. So, I think that is these guys are super creative. It's chocolate, the world's first civilization with chocolate, the world's first rubber people, the world's first zero mathematicians, and footballers.
The idea of sort of Central American ball sports being something that's very old is because you see those amazing. I mean, I've been to Chichen Itza in Mexico, and you see the sort of the Maya courts there, which are slightly later than the Olmec. Those games, they sort of involve the hip. I know that they still play it today. It's insane. They get these rubber balls.
Yeah,
Olmec
I think it's
balls.
like 2 or 3 kilos, right?
Yeah, they're big.
They're big and heavy.
And I think these games back in the day were pretty violent, but today less so. But yeah, they essentially sort of ping it off their hip, a bit like, I don't even know, like there was old Asda advert back in the day, people sort of went like that. And it is, and they ping it through like a tiny, like donut-shaped sort of stone thing. I mean, it's quite remarkable.
It's possible that their colossal heads have got protective gear on, and I'm just wondering, in the world of football, would it change the game if the side that lost were human sacrificed?
Yes.
I mean, do you think that would be a different type of game?
I mean, sometimes when football teams lose, their fans are often calling for stuff that's not a million miles away from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the stakes that these Mesoamerican ball games are played at would have made it. I mean, I've been watching a lot of Winter Olympics this week. That was bit tense for me. I was watching the women's curling yesterday.
Yeah.
And I found that quite hard to watch.
If you lose, you basically lose your life.
And these curlers, they were just losing the competition, and I had to turn it off. I found it too stressful to watch Switzerland, USA.
So I think, that's quite a major thing. And obviously that board game is incredibly kind of modern in a sense, right? A bouncing ball, with protective gear and helmets, and it's a public spectacle. I mean, let's mark it down that these are super creative people.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, these guys were building in a time of... again, thousands of years ago we're talking here. They were building massive... I mean, these things are absolutely
20 tons or something.
Yeah, 20 tons. I mean, they're as tall as me and you and as wide as me and you. They are, as in like that way round. They're not.
But they're all bald. The people, all the Olmec statues are bald.
Well, maybe they had hair, but that hasn't lasted. Maybe they had.
So you actually could be all.
I'm not.
You're
bad.
not a million miles away.
I agree.
From an Olmec.
And they're super expressive. Like I think, like when you look at I know a lot of like really old art. I think this stuff. This is old. It's thousands of years old. A lot of it's very sort of what's the word? Representative. Figurative. But they look like real people. They're making real expressions. Like they are. I mean, incredible
artistry. Yeah,
100%.
The art is phenomenal.
Feats of art, and I think. You're right to draw on how creative they are. The Olmecs were one of, if not the first civilization to really take cacao and turn it into part of their sort of not only daily life but like cultural routine as well. But what's really interesting is they weren't the first people to ever eat or more likely drink cacao, either the pods or turning it into a drink. That was done thousands of years before even that, 5,000 years ago, the first. That's in South America. That's in places like modern-day Ecuador and modern-day Brazil and the sort of in the foothills of the Andes. And so quite how, I've not been able to find this out, quite how these Olmecs not only were able to set up these remarkable, unseen cities, they were also able to set up religion and religion iconography that spread around the region, but they also clearly had an eye for what was going on far and wide because they were able to actually pick up on this micro trend going on in faraway Ecuador and bring it over to Central America and Mexico where they're based.
We think they're the first, and we can have this clarified by an expert, but we think they're the first cocoa civilization, the first chocolate civilization.
Yeah, as far as
they may not be the first people to ferment and roast cocoa. So let's just explore that for a second. So we know that we've got theobromine in pottery pieces, in an extensive number of pottery pieces in their capital, San Lorenzo.
Absolutely
so we
right.
know, as an archaeological piece of evidence, that they are the first chocolate civilization. That we can bank. We think we know that they probably explored chocolate. Obviously, they would have eaten the fruit, right? And it's delicious. We also think that they would have probably explored it from a sort of fermentation to get the alcohol out of it, right? So they probably were the first civilization to drink chocolate alcohol. And then we could postulate that they would have left the cacao fermenting. And then, and the genius bit, these guys are creative, we've discovered this, they would have roasted it. And it's at this point that they go, wow, this is amazing chocolate. But they take it to the next level, right? These guys are further ahead than we are today with chocolate.
Why do you say that?
Because they weren't then satisfied with, wow, I've roasted it, I've sun-dried it, I've now ground it, and I've fermented it. So all those steps, they went, no, we're a very special people. We are going to turn it into a chocolate cappuccino. And they poured it. We know this, that they poured it from a mug high up and then dropped it and created this.
The Maya. So the Maya are. It all gets a bit hazy. As far as I understand, the Maya are sort of a people that come not after the Olmecs, but essentially concurrently, and then sort of outlast them and start slightly later. But they're very, 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 very much happening at the same sort of time. And unlike the Olmecs, the reason why we often with the Olmecs say that we can't be sure is because we don't have any Olmec records. We have no Olmec writing. We've got no idea how their language works. We have numbers and dates and things and calendars inscribed on stones, but no written history. Whereas the Maya we do, and in sort of Maya texts, of which they exist today, and they're thousands of years old, you can see absolutely right these images of priests and priestesses and people pouring chocolate or cacao. You're right, in these sort of massive high things, creating a sort of lovely cappuccino.
And that was prized very, very highly, maybe even more than the chocolate. And, it's fair to say you've probably never walked into a cafe and said, I want a chocolate cappuccino before. And that's my point. They're more advanced today than we are. Also, and maybe we should explore a chocolate cappuccino.
If you got the marketing right, I reckon you could charge £8 or £9 in the trendier parts of London for a sort of traditional Maya or Olmec, as you call it, chocolate cappuccino.
Yeah, whist, and particularly if it was prepared by a priestess. And it was sacred.
You'd want a priest or a priestess involved,
and particularly if it was celebrating some football match, with rubber balls that, if you get wrong,
you're toast.
You're toast. That would make that would bring it back into Olmec culture, right? We would be partly Olmec at that point.
Our love of, ball sports and having a bit of chocolate. I don't think we're that far away from the Olmecs now.
I think that's fair. I mean, what fascinated me about this was that also the Olmecs are considered as, a mother culture, the first great civilization, and a pristine culture, and one that came from a rainforest. And I think, and we can check this with our expert later, that they are the predominant or the main civilization that emerged from a rainforest.
Is that right?
It's a rainforest culture, which you don't really get on this scale anywhere else in the world.
Andrew, you mentioned there, we are going to be joined very soon by a world expert on not only the Olmecs, but the Maya and the Aztecs as well. Dr. Ed Barnard, who is a world-leading archaeologist. He, at 25 years old, discovered a Mayan city in the jungle in Belize. Is going to be joining us here, and hopefully he'll be able to answer some of our burning questions. And, I guess paint more of a picture about who these people were, who those very, very early chocolate drinkers were, maybe even beyond the Olmecs, further back into sort of going back into South America, trying to discover who those people were that were making this stuff, so that we can get a better understanding of a civilization and a culture which is, I think, shrouded in quite a lot of mystery even now.
And I think the wonderful thing about, if you are a sort of rainforest civilization, you're going to have incredible flavors, aren't you, in your chocolate? You have got the diversity and wealth of a botanical Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you're going to put chili, you're going to put vanilla, you're going to put honey, you're going to put annatto, which is obviously the red spice, and you're going to put, flowers, so chocolate.
They had all sorts. They had all sorts of, I'm not saying they necessarily put this with chocolate, but the coca leaf as well. We know that they were, even sort of before the Olmecs, was something that people were chewing on and getting a buzz from that, and that sort of.
That's super relevant because they had these shamans, right? Didn't they? The shamanic power of, if you're going to live in the jungle, you are going to come across psychedelics. You are going to put that in your chocolate, and you are going to see were Jaguars. By that I mean, like we have werewolves.
I see, Jaguars, fine, yeah.
This would be a situation, Ed, where let's imagine you're bald, which is not hugely.
I've been.
You have been bald, so you could be
a
colossal head, but so your head would be, like a footballer's a colossal head, but your body would be that of a jaguar.
Yeah.
You know, with like the claws. That's, you know, they didn't worry about werewolves. They worried about jaguars.
They loved them as well. I mean, if you look at loads of the Olmec art, I mean, it's all about jaguars and little stone jaguars and babies turning into jaguars and men turning into jaguars. I mean,
they had baby jaguars.
Do you think people were turning into jaguars? Like, I mean, like,
I think it's possible.
It's another question for Ed, and I think Ed is gonna join us now, and so yeah, we'll cut away, and in a moment we'll be joined by one of, if not the world-leading archaeologists in the areas of the Olmecs and the Mayans.
And we're going to quiz him on where jaguars.
Yes.
Because I think that is important.
I think you're right.
So Ed introduced you as the Indiana Jones of the Mesoamerica.
Yeah, I said, Andrew, we've got basically Indiana Jones. We've got this doctor who's not only an expert, but also has actually gone out in the field and discovered a Mayan city. We thought that, to be honest, more for my own just interest more than anything else. But could you tell us a little bit about that process and what that was like?
Well, sure. I did it a long time ago, so sometimes it feels like I'm talking about my high school football career or something when I'm talking about it. I was 25 when I did that, but it was in Belize. And, you know, the truth is there's a ton of the Maya area that hasn't been explored on foot. LiDAR's changing the game, slowly but surely. But back then, there were just wide swaths of area that nobody had really searched for archaeology. So that's what I did back there in Belize. It's a big area called Program for Belize that was originally bought by Coca-Cola, and they were going to strip the whole thing and put an orange grove there. And the country said, no, that's terrible. So they forced them to give it back, and it was a preserve, but no one had really been in there since the days of British logging. And that was actually one of the keys that helped me get there. Is it was such a mountainous area.
Don't mention British logging. We don't log things. We grow them.
Well, you know, our cultures have all made mistakes in the past. All we can try to do is be better than our predecessors.
Yeah.
I over here in this country, I'm in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, we know.
Gosh, yeah. No, I watched the video of you describing that process of finding those logging paths. Tell just our listeners, our viewers, what you named this Mayan city you discovered and why you called it that.
Well, I called it Mashna, MA''AX na, which means monkey house. And that was because there were monkeys all over its central plaza. That's where they lived. And when we showed up and had lunch there, they were pissed. They were all in the trees above us, trying to throw things at us and get us out of there. So from the initial discovery that it was indeed a city we were sitting in, which is sometimes not so easy when you're in the middle of a jungle, I decided it was their home and we had invaded it. So I called it Monkey House.
That's incredible. I'm getting sort of images of the sort of a mix between the Jungle Book and Tintin. I don't know if that's kind of, you know, and Indiana Jones all mixed up in one, you know, monkeys, lost civilizations, you know, this is great.
It does sound like a sort of film plot. So obviously our real focus is on chocolate and cacao. We're starting this new season. We sort of spent the previous season of our podcast looking at, I guess we'd say, like, cacao is this like amazing food, both like as an extraordinary thing to eat and taste, but also with these amazing health benefits. And we now want to sort of go back and look at the effects of this incredible food on humanity from, I guess, sort of the origin of the food and those really early cultivators right up until the present day and the role that it plays in sort of the 21st century. What can you tell us about the very first cacao cultivators, those people who, I don't know, saw this quite odd plant and thought there's something we can do with that?
Well, in Mesoamerica, which I do still think is the origins of humans' interaction with cacao, it was the Olmec people. They are the very first civilization of Mesoamerica. That's not to say people weren't there. The Olmec are just the first time that we see it really materialize as a major coordinated civilization with tens of thousands of people living in, dense, what we could almost call urban clusters. But those were the first people. They were in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which in Mexico, that's where, Mexico starts big and fat up in the north, and then it kind of hooks down like a big J. And on the bottom of the J is this thinnest part. That's called the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And that's where all of this cacao was growing naturally. And so the Olmec are the ones that we know of that are the first to actually start consuming it. And frustratingly, they don't make any art that shows us how much they love or think about cacao. But thanks to modern chemistry, we can now analyze some of their pottery, and we've noted on numerous occasions now that it has that theobromide, I think it is, in the residues of the pots, which proves that they are eating it and perhaps processing it.
And so, I mean, basically, you're saying that Olmecs are the first chocolatiers in the world. And how do you think they would have kind of learned the steps of fermentation and then roasting and drying and then winnowing? It's quite a complex process.
And I think, honestly, we don't know how much of that they employed or knew. Because getting chemical residues proving that there's chocolate in pots is not necessarily enlightening us to how much they used it. Did they just take the seeds and crunch those up, or did they actually ferment them? Fermenting can happen almost accidentally. In fact, I'd argue that half the things that are fermented in the world today were just a product of surprise neglect and someone trying to eat food sources that had gone bad and realized, hey, that was actually kind of fun. We should do that more often.
Do you think they were consuming sort of a chocolate alcohol, and the fermentation of the beans was a byproduct that they then discovered tasted amazing?
Is Andrew's big theory?
That's a theory. And I need an Indiana Jones to tell me that's he
Doctor Indiana Jones.
That he also got drunk on chocolate alcohol in the monkey.
Oh gosh, I wish I have never tasted the alcoholic chocolate. I would like to do that. I've had pulque, which is nasty, horrible stuff that's made of the agave that tequila is made of. Corn beer is pretty nice, but I've never tried the chocolate. But we do know that they are fermenting it and frothing it up in the Maya times. The funny thing, the Olmec are our first civilization, but there's so much we don't know about them, in part because they chose to live in this very swampy environment with acidic soils. So a lot of the things that would preserve in another region, like, desert kind of areas, just went away.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of backward projecting from the cultures that came after the Olmec and saying, well, if we know these guys are doing this, how did they learn it? Well, maybe they learned it from the Olmec. So we see the Maya really are the ones that take special care and love for chocolate. And we start seeing it painted in images, and we have pots that are specifically designed to hold it. We have hieroglyphs that say, this is the king's chocolate vessel. And so we see a lot of that. But how much of it was fermented and how much of it was just like roasted and then put into a kind of almost, coffee-like process? It's confusing to me. I don't know how much information we have about the actual steps that they were taking when we're looking at it from a culinary perspective. From a cultural perspective, we know that they loved it, and it became, over time, it became something that was connected to elite activities. Elite people tended to drink chocolate. In the Olmec area, we do find it all over the place. So it's somewhat egalitarian back then. But in the Maya context, we find it mostly with the upper class. And then as time goes on, the beans of the cacao become a currency. And by the time we're in the Aztec times, just before contact, even though they don't grow it at all up where's now Mexico City, it won't grow there. You guys have probably talked at length about how fragile a plant this is, and you can only grow it in certain environments with the right soil and the right shade. It's complex, but the Aztecs nevertheless were using it in their market as a kind of almost currency. The barter system still needs some sort of anchor as to what's worth what. And cacao beans were kind of that thing. They could say, like, a turkey equals 100 cacao beans. But it was so valuable, they actually made counterfeit beans. They're in museums around Mexico where they're made of ceramic, but they really do look like cacao beans. And people were like making counterfeit money in Aztec times out of chocolate.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Just on the Olmecs, you mentioned sort of the fact that in the past 15, 20 years, we've developed this technology where we can use theobroma residue to find it on pots in a way that we just couldn't do before. I was reading some archaeological reports as part of research for this episode on San Lorenzo and on burial pits that were found there, and along with sort of bodies and stingray sort of stings with human blood on. They found in and amongst those broken pots with theobroma residue. Obviously, you can only really guess exactly what was going on there in terms of what role cacao played in those ceremonies, if at all. But in terms of those ceremonies and those sort of burial pits, from your perspective, what's going on there? What sort of people were these that we find these sort of quite bizarre sites, these quite bizarre array of things there?
That's a fair assessment of the Olmec from our Western eyes. They are fairly bizarre, but I don't think that their consumption of chocolate is bizarre to us at all. Everybody who's ever consumed chocolate realizes this is awesome.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a no-brainer that they found this interesting plant that grew in their area and that they became enamored with the seeds. So we see it there in San Lorenzo. There's actually our oldest evidence comes before San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo is really the first Olmec city, and it goes from maybe 1800 BCE to about 1000. And really like 1200 to 1000 is where we see so much evidence of their activity, and their population explodes before the city's abandoned. But the city before that, not far from San Lorenzo, is El Manatee. And we have the great benefit of this being an anaerobic bog, like the ones that preserve y'all's creepy bog bodies.
Yeah.
And from, I think the evidence of the pots with residue of chocolate in them are from 1600 BCE, and they were found in this anaerobic bog, which preserves organics in a way that other things don't. They also found these beautiful wooden statues, and they found actually a bunch of creepy baby skeletons that
Nice.
Yeah.
but they were all in that mix of things that they felt were sacred enough to put in this bog. And it was definitely a ritual deposit area. Among them were jars of chocolate. So we can say from that they really felt that was sacred stuff from the earliest evidence we have of them having interactions with it.
I understand the Olmecs are one of the first or greatest or sort of rainforest culture. And that would mean that you've got an incredible diversity of plants. Now, of course, being chocolatiers, you're going to use that diversity of plants in your chocolate, be it chili, vanilla, or something that we don't even know what it is ear flower or something. I mean, what do you think they were putting in their chocolate? And is there any sort of evidence, maybe even later, that shows how they were, what recipes?
They were definitely using chilies.
Right.
That was their most common additive.
Right.
And today that's also a recipe that survives in Mexico in moles. If you've ever had that chocolate sauce, you guys probably have. All sorts of stuff. I recommend going to Oaxaca. There's these cute little old grandmas who have like 30, 40 different kinds of mole, and you can test them all with these little spoons like you're at the ice cream shop. Best thing ever.
Chili and what? Chili and chocolate, or chili vanilla and chocolate? Chili with honey?
Usually chili. There are other like herbs and spices sort of things like momo they'll put in there. That's kind of almost a licorice flavor. But vanilla is one that I've seen in reports. But today, I think most of what I've seen is chilies. There's
Right.
one really cool piece of evidence from El Salvador. There's a site,
Joy de Seren?
Seren,
Yeah.
yeah, Seren. So you know that one where they found a pot with layers of chili and chocolate. So, some people say that's to make the chocolate drink, but it could also be making the mole. That's from about 650
Yeah. Wow.
CE. And that one is a neat piece of evidence that, yes, definitely they're even storing it together. These things go together like peanut butter and jelly, the chili and the chocolate, a very different chocolate than what you and I have grown to appreciate.
We'll excuse you as an American for putting jelly with peanut butter, okay?
Oh, I'm a big
What goes with peanut butter, right?
Chocolate.
Ed, I'm completely with you on
Chocolate.
that. I'd say jam, but I mean peanut butter and jelly is I think one of the great combinations. Just to go back to something you said earlier, just for our British listeners, Oaxaca, Ed, you might not know, is that's sort of the UK version of Taco Bell, but I think slightly worse. I think just so our listeners know, when Ed said you can go to Oaxaca and try mole, he's talking about the beautiful Mexican region and not the sort of slightly average high street chain we have over here.
Oh, really? You guys have a fast food place that's called Oaxaca?
Yeah, but I would say there are some great Mexican restaurants. I would say one of the biggest disparities between the US and the UK is our Mexican food is seriously lacking. I think it's something we're desperately waiting for that sort of gastronomic revolution.
And one of the things we've talked about is the fermentation of chocolate, but in that region to this day, and therefore possibly originally, they were drinking chocolate. Two things. One is live, right? It was live cultures, so it would have been good for the, your stomach and biosphere. But also, we understand they were making chocolate cappuccinos. And, we think that, that's a great invention, right? And is there evidence? I know that we've got Mayan evidence for that, but is there any do you think that came from the Olmecs?
We're talking, chocolate cappuccino, not obviously not having with coffee in, but the sort of the practice of sort of foaming it, kind of pouring it from a great height to create that sort of cappuccino.
Oh, yes.
Froth.
Yes. That was definitely evidenced in the Maya. We have no images from the Olmec. That's not to say we won't get some someday, but we lack that imagery that the Maya, you can clearly see it kind of frothing over the top of pots.
Right.
And there's a very specific kind of tool you use to froth it. This kind of, it looks like almost like a wooden mace where there's all sorts of points sticking out of the head of it. And then it's got a stir stick, and you rub it together so it really quick, like a blender, froths it up.
Wow.
So we know they had a specific tool made just to froth chocolate.
Wow. Have you had frothy chocolate?
I have.
And what's it like? And we should have it here, right?
We tried to sort of replicate it using what we had, and we found it quite difficult. I remember.
Well, we don't have.
It is really hard to froth it up. You can do that pour thing, and that does it somewhat. But that stir stick does great.
Yeah,
I was on some funny travel show from the Great Courses years ago, and I went to the Chocolate Museum in Uxmal and made chocolate on film with one of the Maya chocolatiers there, and we had a fun time. He showed me how to use the tool, and I put, like, at one point I put a bunch of chili powder in mine, and I was like, was that too much? Was stupid? And he goes, yes, that was stupid. Like, well, thanks. Thanks for your honesty. But I still drank it and frothed it up good. It was good. A very different taste when you don't have all the sugar piled in it. But
yeah.
It was a different beast. It was not the chocolate that we of the modern world are used to, but it was frothy, that's for sure.
And they would have used a metate as well, wouldn't they? And they, our concept is that they probably, would have made their corn and their chocolate all on the same metate, as they grind it away. Is that, again, is that us speculating, or do you think that's
Well, no, I think that's logical sense. It's a metate is a hard thing to come by.
yeah,
So you don't have multiple metates. You just clean your one. Everybody had one in their house.
yeah,
And for a lot of that area, they had limestone ones. So a gross amount of limestone got into all their food as well. I saw one study that suggested the average ancient Maya ate about 5 pounds of limestone over their lifetime. And you can see it in their dental morphology. Their teeth are grinded down by the limestone that they're getting out of the chocolate and corn they're grinding on these metates. I was told by a Maya person in the Guatemala highlands that a perfect wedding gift from your grandmother is a metate made of basalt instead of the normal limestone, because that lasts longer and puts less rock in you.
right. Wow.
That's
wow.
incredibly interesting. Going back to the Olmecs, you're so right that we know so much less about them because we don't have these records of their writing. We haven't got as much art in terms of their culture, their religion. What do we know about these people? And I guess how can that how can we sort of use what we know about them to understand the ways they might have used chocolate?
Well, we know that they were, one of the first truly hierarchical societies. We can see, an upper echelon of the kings going down to elites. The city of San Lorenzo, the elites live up on this gigantic platform that they built out of the swamps. But then when you look at the larger community, there are nodes of city centers where those also have what appear to be richer settings, and then on the periphery of those, people get poorer and poorer. So we see that there's a hierarchy, and we tend to find the chocolate in the richer neighborhoods. So we can say that hierarchy was making chocolate something that was more enjoyed by the elites, perhaps. That's really apparent with the Maya, but not. It could be a mistake in the Olmec. As you just pointed out, we have very little archaeology, really. We've intensively studied a few sites, but we always tend to dig the rich parts, not the poor parts.
Yeah, I guess.
And so it could be an illusion of just the data we've collected, because it does stand to reason that since the area was covered in naturally growing cacao, it would be hard for the elites to capture that resource and prevent the lower classes from using it. I do know my friend Carl Wendt did a study in that San Lorenzo area of trash pits around regular houses, and he did find cacao there. So the regular people were eating it there too. So weird side note of what those guys find when they dig the common houses. Another big thing they were eating was dogs.
What?
Right.
They ate dogs like we eat chickens. There are tons of dog bones.
Not come up. We've talked.
They eat the cats and the dogs.
Yeah, Andrew and I have talked about sort of putting together an Olmec or a Maya meal as part of this series, and wondering what we might have in it, and sort of being like, we could have chili and vanilla and cacao and corn. Dog is, I think that's going to be harder to persuade to us.
Yeah, well, if you want to keep it native, maybe just go turkey.
Yeah,
turkey's a better choice. Dog's a weird one.
We have these these colossal heads, don't we? And I was explaining to Ed that they're all bald guys wearing what looks like NFL caps with some sort of AirPod. I don't know. Either they were inventors of American football, or they were, I don't know, pilots or something. And then, as I understood it, and if a team lost, of course, we won't know this from the archaeological, but you might know it from a cultural experience. The team that lost was sacrificed. Is that a fair comment, or is that just?
I think that's a misunderstanding of the evidence and a myth that's been propagated by the guides of these sites, because it sounds exciting.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it doesn't really stand up to just basic logic.
Right.
If the consequences of losing a sporting event were your death, you would really be hard put to find players.
Yeah, you'd run out of team.
Now, that being said, there are certainly indicators in the Maya that what they were doing was using the ball game as a kind of performative art where the king would play a game against a captive noble that was somewhat a show, and it was recreating the moments of their creation story where the hero twins defeat the lords of death in a ball game and they get sacrificed. So there is a ritual component that's not so much related to the game, but rather the core elements of their religion that they keep reenacting. And they're so in a reenactment setting, we do believe that people were losing their heads after ball games that were really about ritual reenactment of the Popol Vuh rather than the consequences of a sporting event.
Well, Ed's a big supporter of Arsenal, and I think that frankly, if they lose, the only fair thing to do is sacrificial.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the football league if only the winning team survived the season.
Yeah,
it would be very complicated.
It would be numerically challenging.
You alluded there to, I guess, a huge amount of not just sort of information, but also media and art surrounding, I think, Mesoamerica generally, but I think the Maya people particularly. The mythologizing of Mesoamerican peoples. On the one hand, you could argue that this is sort of a celebration, and I don't know, movies like 2012 help people, I don't know, even if it's misinformation, read about the Maya, or is this sort of misinformation incredibly unhelpful? Does it make your job harder?
It's a mixed bag, I would say. On the one hand, I'm excited that more and more people know that the Maya even exist. On the other hand, yes, there are at least 16 million Maya still left on the planet, and I'm sure some of them live in England. If the guy at your convenience store is a Mexican and he's under the height of 5'3", he's probably a Maya and just hasn't mentioned it to you yet what his ethnicity is. But there are tons of them, and we do fall when people think they're gone. It kind of dehumanizes them.
Yeah.
The ones that still live here, the 16 million, they are people we can interact with and still hold an amazing amount of their traditions and, cosmological thought. And when we see them as a gone culture, they fall into all sorts of tropes like the noble savage.
Yeah, correct.
I feel like those sort of things, even though we're headed in the right direction with being more interested and more respectful of what they achieved, I'd like us to get to a point where we recognize they're still here and we could be nice to them right now.
Yeah, correct. And what was the link between the Olmecs, who were quite close to that lake, weren't they? The capital city of the Aztecs was in Tezcatlican or something?
The capital city of, that's Tenochtitlan, sitting in the middle of Lake Texcoco, but that's far from the Olmec.
Is there any crossover between the Olmec and the Aztec?
Culturally, no. Regionally, yes. One of the major trade partners of the Olmec in that Isthmus of Tehuantepec were the first big cultures around Lake Texcoco. Specifically, there was one called Tlatilco culture.
Right.
Which we see a lot of the Olmec artifacts there, and we see an influence from Tlatilco into the art of the Olmec and trade. They were in control of big obsidian resources.
Right.
And the Olmec area has no obsidian, so they're getting it from somewhere, and it's pretty easy to source obsidian. So we know a ton of it was coming from central Mexico.
Right.
And it's everywhere in the Olmec area. Every little common house has obsidian blades that had to come from far away. And the area around Lake Texcoco, which will ultimately become the Aztec Empire or capital, had connections to the Olmec even back in those days.
Wow. Okay.
Similarly, the Olmec and the Maya, obviously, coexist. Not for the continuation of both of their sort of periods, but how did they interact as sort of cultures, and how much sort of crossover is there between Olmec culture and Maya culture, do you think?
Well, on their border, it blurs so hard we're not sure which is which. We have like combination cities, like the city of Chiapa de Corzo in Chiapas has a lot of Olmec qualities and a lot of Maya qualities. It's a blend of the two cultures, and I think Maya existed contemporaneously with the Olmec, but they outlived them. I'd say of all the cultures we have in Mesoamerica, the Maya inherited the most Olmec of anybody. Okay. But back in the day, a lot of it was trade driven. The Olmec loved jade. Again, they lived in a swamp. They didn't have anything but mud and water. So they got their jade from the Maya, and we know that. And there's an interesting thing that the dynamic, I think we're still trying to piece a lot of it together, but an interesting thing to note is they would import this raw jade into the Olmec area, and then they'd carve it with all sorts of esoteric religious symbolism, and then they'd sell it back to the Maya and to other places. So they were taking raw materials from their neighbors, turning them into religious icons, and trading them back to them. So I think they were transmitting their early religious concepts through their trade network.
So I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left, but one thing that I think would be interesting to understand from is, how has your experience with these cultures changed you? What have you learned from them from a cultural perspective? What have you taken away?
Well, I mean, a lot of things at this point. I've done this my whole career. I am half Maya in a lot of ways. I do weird things. I'm a weird numerologist. I'll buy anything in the store that's $9.49 because it's a special number to them. We won't go there. But things like, the very nature of time. I've begun to feel like our Western perspective that time is this line, that we are standing in the dot of the present, and it goes on a line to the past and a line into the future, that perhaps we have that wrong. They see things as cyclical, not that they're going to repeat constantly, but that life goes in cycles, and that time should also go in cycles. And it really is a construct. I question the nature of time because of the things that I've learned about the Maya.
Right.
But I've also, like I said just a little while ago, I think my biggest takeaway is I walked into that area thinking I was studying ancient people to find millions of people that are still their descendants, and getting to know Maya people and know their heart and have, just some solid friends in my life at this point who are Maya people. That was probably the biggest change in my life. It humanized what I saw as an anthropological specimen. Now I look at it as their granddads and grandmas, and I do my best to put a positive spin on who these people are, because they're not just anthropological specimens, they have descendants. Right. And what we say about them reflects upon their modern living descendants.
Yeah. And I mean, the impression we get is that they were incredibly creative, right? I mean, to vulcanize rubber, it took us until the 19th century to do the same. That's impressive, right? Obviously, we know.
Absolutely.
We know their love of chocolate, and we share that. But I think, Ed and I have the belief that we've kind of polluted their chocolate compared with the quality that they had. We use lesser quality beans. We use it with sugar and coke.
And they've been hybridized so much, the entire chocolate industry is in danger.
Exactly.
There's a place in the Maya Mountains in Belize where they found an old grove about 15 years ago, and chocolatiers were super excited about that. Do I have time to tell you a little story about the area of the Olmec area and what's still growing there?
Yeah.
There are big cacao plantations still in that area. One of them I like to visit when I bring people down there is a place called Hacienda La Luz. And it's a cacao plantation created by a German man in the 1940s named Walter.
Right.
And he and his family moved there, and he knew what he was looking for. So he went out into the jungle there in the 1940s, before the chocolate industry is what it is today, and found this special kind of chocolate. It's a white chocolate. They call it criollo.
Yeah, criollo.
These white chocolate beans are key. You guys probably know much more about it than I, but they're key to the really fine European chocolates.
Correct.
And it was something that people did not, they were running out of. But Walter found it and brought it back to Hacienda Luz, and now he has a whole hacienda of it. And it's beautiful. And there's a little tour you can do. But years ago, I brought a chocolatier from New Mexico there who had been hunting for this white chocolate and a source for his chocolate company. And when he saw it and stood there in this grove, he like openly cried about it. I was ignorant. I was like, what are you crying about? He was like, this is the treasure of all chocolate. Yeah. And I'm standing in a forest of it.
Yeah.
And so that was neat to see that it's still, the best chocolate's still growing there.
Yeah, no, that is
to us. That's like the unicorn of chocolate. 100%. It's almost a mythical
Hacienda Luz.